has throat gonorrhea, doesn't it? Oh, hey, we're recording.
Really gonorrhea.
I'm going to shoot the yellow discharge right at the camera.
If it's gonorrhea, it's green, bud.
Is it green?
I
thought it was yellow.
I don't know. I've never seen it. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
I'm trying
to
know that,
I've
Joe.
never had the VDs.
So neither one. So hold on.
So nobody's ever given me anything for Valentine's Day.
Before we get into this more serious topic. So neither one of you all. I remember 7th grade specific
gonorrhea
having to have a sex ed class where it wasn't even about sex ed. It was an hour of them showing us slides of different.
Oh yeah, no, yeah.
No,
STD.
well, we had a little bit of sex ed in 7th grade, but I don't remember a slide.
Oh, no, you would remember these because it's not healthy. Here's what will happen if you're not safe.
Here's what happens if you touch your penis. Right?
Here's Jesus crying.
So funny story, and it's ingrained in my head. We spent an hour being traumatized by all these slides of what syphilis does to your genitals, what gonorrhea does to your genitals. And then the slideshow ends and our teacher says, so are there any questions? And this poor kid, Ryan, who's probably a lawyer at this point, raised his hand and asked, how do cats and dogs do it? And he was serious. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a gag. He wanted to know. That's what he learned from an hour of those slides, is he wanted to know how cats and dogs do it and if that could happen to them.
With one another, like interspecies, or
the teacher dismissed him. We did not get further explanation to that question, but a lot of us looked into class and looked at him weird. And then, nobody talked to him the rest of the year.
And now he may be a lawyer, but he's also in a basement somewhere.
Please, in 7th grade, I was in the back corner, not talking to anybody. I wasn't going to raise my mouth to ask a question.
Well, now that we're done talking about gonorrhea, why not syphilis?
Are we?
Why didn't we start talking about syphilis?
Oh,
I mean, it doesn't matter. Boneheads, we're here. We're really sad today, and I feel like we would have got to this director eventually. Because, I mean, eventually we're going to just run out of, we'll just go from, there's only so many 1990s and 1980s years we can go through for an episode.
Oh, I mean, but we can eventually get back to the 1950s. That's
true. Good point, James. Good point. But this guy gave us some of the best pop culture entertainment of the 80s and 90s, specifically.
And let's talk, and also the 60s and the 70s too.
Well, that's absolutely true. And we'll go through his career. And for my two comic book nerds here, there wouldn't. I don't think. I mean, when you have Chris Nolan saying it was him, he took the blueprint for what he did on Superman and used that for his Batman movies.
He made the comic book movie. He did.
And so who we're talking about today is
Richard Donner. I was trying to come up with a joke and I couldn't.
Yeah, Dick Donner to his friend.
Hey, real quick, before we get into Richard Donner, I briefly want to, because we can't dedicate a whole episode to him, but we briefly should talk about another person who passed a few days after Richard Donner.
Are you talking about William Smith?
I am not talking about whoever
we
you
lost
just
William
said.
Smith too. Not Will Smith, kids. Look up William Smith.
We also lost Craig Syphilis. I got nothing. Go, James. Chad. Who's talking?
We lost Chick Vanira this week.
Who's Chick Vanira?
So he is mostly known for his. He had a role on the Golden Girls.
Yeah.
I forget. I forgot his name in the Golden Girls, but James. He and Joe, because we're all three fans of this show.
Yes.
He was Pesto, as on the Goodfeathers.
Oh, really?
It's been a long time. I can't remember.
He was the Joe Pesci archetype.
Oh,
well,
Nick Vanir.
That one.
Bourbon. Sorry, guys.
We lost him this week. He played Enrique Mas or Pepe on the Golden Girls.
Okay, I'm gonna have. Enrique Mas. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, so we lost him this week, but I know we're talking about Richard Donner, but he had such an impact on me for Animaniacs that I briefly wanted to mention him, and so we're gonna miss him. So Pesto is no more.
And to let you all know, that's who Rose worked for. was him on Enrique Moss.
Okay,
He was
cool.
an investigative reporter. So there you go. You're right. I knew him when I looked him up, but I know him from that show. I don't know him from some other stuff.
Yeah, he's mostly a character actor and did a lot of voiceover work for several cartoons. But let's go back to Richard Donner.
So Richard Donner.
Real quick, I do want to acknowledge William Smith, because William Smith was a character actor.
Bill Smith to his friends.
Really? I don't know that.
I think he was Willie.
He was Dick Donner to his friends, by the way.
Clint Eastwood came out and made a statement about it, but he's in Any Which Way You Can, Rich Man, Poor Man, Laredo. He's in over 270 things. He was also a stuntman. If you saw him, you'd know him just because he was.
Oh, that guy.
That guy, exactly. So he was 88 years old. I mean, it's not shocking that he passed away, but he had a huge thing. He actually, was. He directed a movie about Vietnam as well. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. Yes, he was in a lot of different stuff.
Conan.
Yeah, he did. He was a stunt coordinator on the A-Team for a while as well. Just that, I mean, he was all over pop culture, especially in the 70s and 80s. Listen. They announced his death on the radio, and they said William Smith has died, and my kids were like, "Will Smith died?" And I'm like, "No, that's not."
William Smith was my favorite villain on the show Due South. I know I'm laughing. I really like the show Due South about the Canadian Mountie who goes to Chicago.
Yeah,
I've never
loved that show.
He was the villain in the pilot who brought him and the Ray Vecchio together. So there you go. So let's get back to Richard Donner. I'm sorry. I'm tickling myself. I haven't thought about Due South in years.
I'm trying. There's a lot of things that we can go through, and we're going to try to spend.
There's so many.
No more than an hour on it, but it takes as long as it takes. But Christopher Nolan we're going to. Chad and I both were talking before this episode, and we've got people who have written tributes to the man about stuff that he did that didn't come out, which I always think is the best thing you can say about a man or a woman, but about a person is that, and not to get too biblical, but you don't go around talking about your charity, right?
Right.
That shit should come out when you're dead. And people who know it, and people who don't know you, well, that's okay. But then later on, when you're dead, did you know X, Y, and Z did all of this? No, I didn't know that. Well, yeah, he didn't go around talking about it because he wasn't publicizing because it was charity.
Yeah.
And once we'll get to that in a minute. But Dick Donner, Richard Donner, Superman. Christopher Nolan said when he went to do Batman Begins, he went to look at Superman, and it was specific of as real world as possible, and we surround this character with as many great actors as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
he got it all from Richard Donner.
And he made the comment. I saw an interview. They did a retrospective, of course. And I think it was DC Comics, their official account, actually shared a thing where it was him Richard Donner talking about the first time he saw Christopher Reeve fly as Superman.
That's right. It took him a year to figure it out, right, Chad?
Yeah.
And they filmed it in the studio. I want to say Sherwood Studios or something like that. And it's a scene where he's flying into the first flying scene they actually put to film was in the Fortress of Solitude. And that's the clip they showed in this retrospective. And it's Richard Donner saying, we were going to do it. And speaking of him being charitable, he gives it all back to Christopher Reeve. He says, he said, when we were filming it, he said, there was a scene and he goes, in my mind, I said, you'll fly across. And he said, you'll fly. And he said, it was Christopher Reeves that did the hand motions different and tilted and stuff like that. And he said, and we did it. And he said, we all just stopped. He said, once it was done, he does a lean and he goes, that wasn't scripted. He leaned and it helped it was perfect. And he said, we all just stopped. Yeah. And he said, and then there were people that actually were starting to kind of tear up and other people started to applaud. And he said, I knew then we had it.
Yeah. Well, and
Christopher, real quick, Christopher Reeves, and not just because he played him the first time, it's damn near impossible to replace Christopher Reeve because he played both characters.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
Right, guys?
There hasn't
you all said that before, right?
Yeah, no, I completely, and I'm going to agree with you. Yeah. There has not been another actor who has played Superman and Clark Kent that way. Yeah. Christopher Reeve embodied Clark Kent. He made him bumbling, stuttering. He was a klutz, and then he transformed into Superman. In any iteration since then, Superman and Clark Kent are the same person, clearly. Henry Cavill didn't do any difference between him as Clark Kent and him as Superman.
I agree with you completely.
There has not been
actor. It's just not the same.
And and this, it's very similar to it's going to be argued, but it can't be. Kevin Conroy is the best Batman because Kevin Conroy played Bruce Wayne and Batman as two separate characters in the animated series, and nobody has done it since. And nobody has done it the way that they can. And Christopher Reeve
even Michael Keaton, whom a lot of people say is the best Batman, still kind of plays in the same both.
He's the same in both.
More anger out, but he's still brooding
in
both.
I was going to say, and I think the thing that
absolutely,
it's popped up in a lot of retrospectives. But if you're listening to this and you have never sat down and watched the first Superman movie, go back and do it. Because there's the great scene, and I said since he's passed away, people have shared it 1,000 times on Twitter. But it is it is Christopher Reeves in one scene in about 3 seconds going from Superman to Clark Kent, or Clark Kent to Superman, I should say.
Yeah.
And it's a scene where he's debating telling Lois that he's Superman.
Yeah.
And, he comes in, she turns her back and walks into the other room, and he rolls his shoulders back.
Takes the glasses off.
And you're like, holy crap, he's super. And you know it. But that one little scene, the way that was handled, the way it was directed, the way it's set up, and, his voice changes. And then all of a sudden he realizes, I can't tell her. And, he goes back to her and he, automatically goes back down. And it's just, it is why to this day, as dated as effects may become, as dated as, there's 1,000 computer things you could redo that film on, you could not redo that scene. There's nothing you can.
No.
And also, a lot of Richard Donner's credit goes of how he handled the actors. One of the best stories about Superman is the confrontation with Gene Hackman. Do you all know this story?
I read it the other day. Gene Hackman came out of retirement to speak about Richard Donner.
Yeah. So the story is, so Gene Hackman, and I've known about this story for years. Gene Hackman is a notoriously difficult person to work with. If you don't, go read about the Royal Tenenbaums.
And how good.
And how Bill Murray
show up on set to help Wes Anderson.
Yeah, he came on set wearing a cowboy hat and stood around watching Gene Hackman because Gene Hackman wouldn't behave. So same thing with this. He refused. He had a really big 70s style mustache going on at the time, and he would not shave his head. He's like, he did not want to be Lex Luthor the way Lex Luthor should be. So Richard Donner came up with this big plan to get him to shave that mustache. So he had a mustache when they were casting. Richard Donner did, but he shaved it off. But Gene Hackman hadn't seen that. So Richard Donner had the makeup and effects people put on a big beard mustache back on him, and basically went to Gene Hackman and goes, look, I'll make you a deal. You shave off your mustache and I'll shave off mine. And Gene Hackman, thinking he was full of shit, said, you're on. So Gene Hackman sit down in the chair and they shaved off his mustache. And he goes to Richard Donner, goes, now it's your turn. And Richard Donner just peels that son of a bitch off and starts laughing at him. And Gene Hackman gets furious.
Although in his story, he doesn't tell it that way, does it?
Yeah, no. But he got furious and was ready to fight him. But then he eventually calmed down and laughed it off. And they became best friends after that. And that's how Richard Donner handled his actors. And, there's even story, Marlon Brando was a handful too. Marlon Brando's lines were written on the baby's diaper. But he handled them.
Well,
and fucking Krypton. I want to punch every time I see. I want to punch.
He told a story, but in his defense, he talked about this. He said it was crazy. The quote from Richard Donner, it was crazy to pay him that much money. Why did we pay him that much money? And then I looked at the dailies. And then I saw him on screen. It's like, we didn't pay him enough.
Yeah.
Well,
he was good, except for
Marlon Brando.
The seriously, the one and it still bothers me to this day is that he pronounces it Krypton.
Yeah.
I still can't get it. I can't shake it. I love that movie.
We're only talking about one movie.
Yeah, we still got to talk about a lot.
We didn't even talk about the horror films. We haven't talked about the television. We haven't even got to the producing.
You all have talked about stories though of him working with actors, and I want to share this story that I read online. And Brian Bagby, who did some stuff in 2000, but is now the writer for the Wild Bunch that's been announced. And so he's not, a lot of people, he was coming up, and he did, like I said, he has some credits from two. Yeah, but he's been working for a while. He just doesn't have a lot that he wrote a lot. Not a lot of stuff got made. Common affliction that we hear about. I want to share the story that he shared about his encounter with Richard Donner, because it shows his respect for the people who came before him. And he tweeted it as a thread, but it was fascinating. I ended up reading it all. And so he was inspired by Spielberg. And what did Spielberg do to get noticed? He snuck onto a lot and went around until somebody paid attention to it.
Yep.
Well, the problem is Bagby is doing this. Brian Bagby decides to do it in the 90s. And he sneaks on to the Universal lot where Amblin is and stuff like that. And he has a rough cut of a film he's made, and he's going to get somebody to see it. And so he got by security. He did, all this stuff. And he actually talks about, he only had one good professional shirt. He was a film student. He was poor. And so he had one, he had his interview shirt, so to speak. And so he slips in, he does this time and time again, but he said it's like they knew he was coming, nobody would be out. And then finally, one day, he spots somebody, and it's Richard Donner. Richard Donner is coming out of coming out from Joel Silver's shingle, as he says, his offices, and they happen to see him. And he was 20 years old at the time. And he stops and he said, Mr. Donner. He finally gets his attention. He walks over. And he said, I felt like Ralphie in A Christmas Story when he's talking to Santa. Yeah. And things start to go bad. And I'll just read it. So, he said, I was getting blotchy. I was so nervous and all of that stuff. And the Donner looks at me and finally goes, kid, how old are you? And he says, and he goes, I tell him I'm 20 years old. And he goes, has a girl broke your heart yet? And he says, I stutter. I say, no, I don't know. And he tells me, well, you can't tell a good story until that's happened to you, son. And he gives me a big smile, pats me on the back, and walks away. Now, this is where the story gets interesting. He says, when I was 20, he goes, we're almost 20 years later, and he goes, and then it dawns on me, I just talked to the guy that did Superman and the Goonies. And he goes, so I'm like, oh, even though it was whatever, I didn't get my movie out there, it's still, I got to meet him. He goes, so 25 years later, I've told the story to all my friends. I'm starting to come up. I'm getting meetings. And somebody goes, oh, you know what? You probably reach back out to Richard Donner. He goes, I'm not going to do that. Somebody does it for him. And so he says, I got a phone call. So Richard Donner said, oh, yeah. I remember that. Talking to you that day. And he's like, there's no way you remember that, Mr. Donner. You probably meet so many people and all that stuff. He goes, no, you were in that blue shirt. And he goes, I thought, oh my God, my nice shirt was blue. He remembers all that. And then he finally says, I'm just going to quote Richard Donner here. And then in the conversation, he goes, I'm just bullshitting you. It was just a lucky guess about that blue shirt. Talked to him, made all of it up. Didn't remember any of it. But he said, and so it was just this awesome moment where he faked a conversation with me that he remembered meeting me 25 years ago. And didn't actually remember any of it, but still talked to him about it on the phone.
Well, and also to Jeff Jones, Richard Donner, and him getting people into the business. If it wasn't for Richard Donner, comic book movies the way they are today wouldn't be the way they are, because a lot of people don't realize Kevin Feige started under Richard Donner right out of college. Richard Donner gave him his break. Also, unfortunately, I can't say unfortunately, Jeff Johns also got with Richard Donner's production company as an intern, and would later, go on to do many things. He is still one of the greatest comic book writers of all time, but his, let's be honest, his dips into Marvel DC movies has not been the most
Well,
well received. He had a large hand in that Green Lantern movie. That still pisses me off to this day.
Well, and actually, and credit where credit is due. You're right, Chad, because what a lot of people, of course, he gets credit for Superman, but he also was one of the executive producers for X-Men.
Well, Laura Schuler
Donner
is his wife of many years.
Yeah.
And she produced all the X-Men films. She was one of the main producers for all the X-Men films. Well, you all have told that. I'm going to tell a really quick one, and this is going to be paraphrased. And so, for many of you who are fans of the Goonies, I'm actually liked it as a kid. I like it a little less now, but that's a whole other story we've talked about. Jeff Cohen played Chunk in the Goonies. And towards the end, as he got older, his career kind of winded down, and he wanted to go to law school, and he got accepted to Berkeley. The problem is he couldn't afford to go to Berkeley, and he had reached out to Richard Donner and said, if you don't mind, can you please write me a letter of reference, because I'm trying to get some scholarships. I can't afford to go. Family couldn't afford to send me. Because you think, oh, he's a millionaire, he's in Goonies. That's not how the business works at all. And if you all listen to this show, for the many different people that have been on this show, there are some millionaires. Most are just working stiffs. And
especially child actors.
So Richard said, fine, if you can go ahead and write me a letter kind of saying all what you've done and what it is, and I'll write the letter for you. He did that and basically found out later, and he asked him, hold on, what did you do? And he said he called everyone kid, even if they're only 5 years younger than them, he would call them kid. Kid, Laura and I talked about it. We just paid for it. He paid for his whole law school to Berkeley. Took care of him.
Which is amazing.
And now he's an entertainment attorney. And he said he can never, ever repay Richard Donner, because Richard Donner gave him his whole second part of his life, or at least the opportunity to do the second part of his life. As a child actor that petered out. He said, I'm not an actor. Everything you see in Chunk in the Goonies, Richard got out of me, because he just got it out of me. He pulled a performance out of me. I am not a good actor. And like I said, probably didn't go around talking about all the kids he spent paying scholarships for, which is what you're not supposed to do. Anyway, that's our stories. Let's talk a little bit about the beginning of his career. He started out in television, correct, gentlemen?
I was shocked that one of his first things was the Loretta Young show.
Is it really? Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wanted Dead or Alive, the DuPont show, Zane Grey Theater. He started out, when television was live. That's this, not to use a stereotypical phrase, but it really is when they separated the boys from the men, right? Because you're shooting that shit live and it's going out live. Wanted Dead for Live, Route 66. Wagon Train. I'm sure I've seen a lot of these. Oh, James, Have Gun Will Travel and The Rifleman. We've had to suffer through that. And Chad, when you were a kid.
I wanted to mention, actually, he worked on
suffer through it. I have fond memories of it. Some of it.
Well, and he did 2 episodes of The Lieutenant.
Yeah.
Which, for those that don't know, if you're a diehard Star Trek fan, you would know that was Gene Roddenberry's show before Star Trek. He got The Lieutenant made, and it starred Gary Lockwood, who would later pop up in some other shows and some movies. But he did 2 episodes, and in my mind, it was one of those things. When I was making all these connections, I was like, that means at some point, I just imagined Gene Roddenberry and Richard Donner having, and it literally was one of those things. That was my 80s geekdom right there in the room together having a conversation. I don't know what that conversation consisted of or how it went, but
like Spielberg. And people forget, Spielberg started out in television. He directed TV movies for Universal. He directed Night Gallery. Was his first credit. Am I wrong? His first professional credit was an episode of Night Gallery. Correct?
You're right. Yeah.
And he said in interviews that television prepared him for directing features better than any film school or anything else could. And Dick Donner did it for 15, 17, a long time. And if you're wondering, back to James, isn't there another Star Trek reference connection when we start talking about the Twilight Zone?
There is, and actually, so Twilight Zone. If you're a fan of the Twilight Zone and you happen to also be a fan of Star Trek, there's 2 William Shatner based episodes that come to mind, and actually credit to I just brain froze myself.
Richard Donner.
Nightmare at 20,000 Feet.
Yeah.
Credit to it, but actually I prefer the other one.
I do too. I prefer not that, but in the movie, the remake,
yeah,
that's the best one with John Lithgow.
Well, yeah. And by the way,
features to actually deliver that,
it's not
as a monkey suit
and that is not my favorite Richard Donner directed episode of the Twilight Zone. He actually directed one of my very favorite periods of the favorite episode, the Jeopardy Room. It's one of my favorite Twilight episodes. Period.
I see that he actually did another one. And real quick, I want to share. William Shatner did do a tweet about Richard Donner when he passed away, and he actually somebody had tweeted out, saying, "Oh, he directed Nightmare at 20,000 Feet." Mm-hmm. And William Shatner tweeted out, he goes, "I'm sorry to hear of his passing. He was a great director, a wonderful director. I don't really have too many memories of the shoot, except it was chaotic." And Shatner says, I'll just quote him, "It was supposed to be a 4-day shoot, but they cut it down in half. They cut it in half and only gave us 2 days." And he said that the look of insanity got better because they wouldn't let us sleep. Oh. We had to shoot so quickly, and Donner was, and this, I'm not quoting Shatner anymore, Donner was going to get that shot. That was the first Twilight Zone he did. Mm-hmm. It was going to work one way or another. It was going to, and he said, so it worked really well. It was chaotic, but in all fairness, it did, he said, if I was supposed to be descending into madness, done. So
back to the man not having a huge ego. You know what he often said about directing? "I'm just a traffic cop."
Chad, you mentioned that you preferred
the Jeopardy Room.
One that I really like, and it doesn't get a lot of play, but it was done so well that it stuck in my head. It's Sounds and Silences.
Yeah, that I remember. Yeah.
If you've never seen that episode, it's a guy's obsessed with noise. He likes things loud. He likes to fire off. He likes to crank his music up. He likes to do all this stuff. And he talks about how he's like that because his mother was the opposite. They weren't allowed to have cookies because cookies could crunch. They only were allowed to have brownies because brownies are quiet. And it seems like he's just neurotic, but you start to kind of understand. And then the twist is that he starts to not be able to hear anything. And
everything goes silent.
Yeah. And so everybody else is hearing, he's slamming stuff, trying to hear noise. He ends up in an asylum, and he's begging them, please make noise, do something to where I can hear. And of course they can. And so it's a weird episode, but it was done well enough that it is burned into my head, and his entire rant and that
played by the amazing character actor John Mcguire.
Yeah, John Mcguire. I was about to say, he does such a great job of just selling this character and why he's obsessed with noise and all of that stuff. And oddly enough, that was I forget where that fell in Donner's direction of, I guess that was actually his third episode they did.
Yeah. Most of them are in 64. I think every episode he did was in 64.
Except for Nightmare. Yeah.
63.
But I didn't realize that episode didn't get aired when it was his third one he did. It did not air on time because they actually faced a lawsuit for it.
No.
There was a writer actually filed a claim saying that his script and title was used that he had done for another show. And they did settle it. They gave him $3,500, but because of that lawsuit, it was delayed in getting released. So there you go. Useless trivia about an episode not many people remember, but it stuck with me.
So we go on through a lot of
I am really shocked he directed episodes of Gilligan's Island.
I'm really shocked he actually did some episodes of Get Smart.
Yeah.
Well, so real quick, we touched on Gilligan's Island.
Get Smart.
Okay, actually, so we get the Twilight Zone. We got the Lieutenant. Actually, I want to mention he also did an episode of Combat.
Yeah, also in The Fugitive.
1963 Combat. If you've never heard of Combat, it actually, my grandfather was a veteran. He would not, in a World War II vet, he would not watch a lot of World War II shows. He said they were all too. He said if you've got good looking people, clean shaven. He goes, "It's fake." He would watch Combat. He said Combat got it right, and so the episode of Combat that Donner directed is actually a one of the soldiers accidentally kills a girl's father, a French girl's father, and he spends the rest of the episode trying to be a role model for her before they have to move on.
Yeah.
And so it just reminded me of my grandfather and then what people had said about him, that was the only one that he said got anything right about it, was actually what it was like to be in the Army during World War II. So,
yeah, and that show had quite a few A-list directors. Robert Altman directed 10 episodes of Combat, for God's sakes. I want to say that was the one he was fired from for what became his normal directing style of people talking over one another.
Right.
So anyway, sorry, back on Donner.
No, well, some of the biggest shows like Perry Mason, Gilligan, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., he worked on them all.
Mr. Novak, which I don't know, but evidently ran for a little bit of time. 12 O'Clock High, Get Smart, The FBI, The Fugitive, It's About Time, Jericho.
You're just reading Wild Wild West.
Yeah.
Wiki Yo Yo Bang Bang, The Wild Wild West.
So essentially for the first 6 years of his career, he was directing television.
And really, we need to pause because it's weird that he did Gilligan's Island. I must admit, I'm even more shocked that he did the Banana Splits Adventures Hour.
I am too. I'm kind of have some questions about that because I had to look it up, and then I was like, yeah, I've heard of it, but I've never really watched it.
Oh, geez, sorry, I was counting Salt and Pepper as his first feature film.
Well, the thing is it is, and then there's London Affair, but in between those two pictures, which was his two final, features, is the Banana Splits Adventure Hour. So now I want to go back and see what the hell he was doing. Was he dropping LSD?
Yeah.
So the Salt and Pepper, I've never seen it. So I was telling Chad before this, I thought I'd seen all of his films. I actually haven't. I'm missing Salt and Pepper, which is Sammy Davis Jr. and Peter Lawford discovering.
Which, how could we have missed that?
I have no idea. I've never even heard of it.
Yeah. Real quick, by the way, I did a quick
duo, Stop the Bad Guys. Go ahead.
I did a quick search, and Richard Donner directed all the live action segments of the entire first season of the Banana Splits, which would be all the Banana Split segments and all the Danger Island segments.
Well, there you go.
And that would include, that means he directed a young Jan Michael Vincent.
So essentially, he directed nonstop television for 15 years.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, he gets The Omen.
Well, it's not.
I mean,
he got the London Affair. So,
I know he got the London Affair, but that was. Go ahead.
Well, so if you guys, not to do a plug, but while the other two were in rehab, which is what I keep saying, I did a little interview with a guy named, I forgot Gary Sherman's name for a split second. Gary Sherman. So if you listen to that interview, he was up. There were several people up for The Omen. The thing is that the original screenplay for The Omen sucked. And Gary Sherman wanted to do he loved the idea of it, but wanted to do, this was after he did the movie Deathline with Donald Pleasance. He had a little bit of, just a little bit of heat.
Well,
He was forever trying to get his next picture. And he talks about this in the interview. And he said, I didn't know, because I was so stupid. I directed Deathline in my early 20s in Britain. I didn't know about studios and how to handle them. I didn't know I could just tell the producer, I want to do it. And then when I got in front of the studio, go, I want to do it, but I want to do a page 1 rewrite. And the studio just agree with me. That's how Dick Donner got The Omen, was he told them he wanted to do it. And then when he got in front of the studio, goes, I want to do it, but I want a page 1 rewrite. Because he even agreed. He was like, it was a great idea for a movie, just the script sucked.
I just like, how did he get that much clout doing 15 years of television with 2 movies?
But really, the early, I guess, quote unquote, working in television, he proved that he could do a product, get it out, get it done on time, on budget.
He directed TV movies before then too. I mean, it would have. It would have, but it's just interesting that I just interviewed Gary Sherman, and he was talking about how he could have almost done The Omen. He also said he could have almost done Alien, which is also another good story. Check out that episode. But let's talk about The Omen for a second. I like it. It's not something I revisit a lot, but it has absolutely fantastic kill scenes in it.
Mm-hmm. All for you, Damien.
That's a good one. Everybody remembers that. They never really captured any of it through the sequels and the remake. No. And the killing of David Warner, spoiler alert, is one of the best death scenes in cinema history. Because Richard Donner cuts to it and you think his head's going to come off. Then he doesn't. He cuts back, then he cuts back, then he cuts back. Because if you're in the audience, you do this, and then you go, and by the third or fourth cut, you finally take your hand off, and then his head gets decapitated.
As one would think.
But it's brilliant. No one had done that before.
And sadly, nobody does it now.
No, they really don't. Oh, my God. Oh, suspense, folks. Your horror needs a little suspense.
I just, and I pulled this off my shelf. I want to mention, just because I mention Harlan Ellison all the time, he does an entire thing about, he did a review of the Goonies, or not the, well, he did actually review the Goonies as well, but he did a review of The Omen because he was doing film critique at the time. And that scene is actually what he talks about. And I'm not going to be able to find the exact quote, but he actually spends all the time talking about David Warner. And he goes, what did David Warner ever do to Richard Donner? Why? And he says, it doesn't, there was 1,000 different ways you could do that. And Ellison's argument was, much like actually you all were saying, if you like death scenes, here's your movie, but it doesn't add much to he goes, if you're looking for a deep religious conversation, this movie wasn't made.
Oh, no, not at all.
It is not The Omen that you're looking for.
Yeah. So we talked about The Omen. Which one do you want to dive into next? Because there's a couple of them here. I mean, he had The Omen, then he went to Superman because The Omen was such a hit. I mean, that makes sense that he was able to get Superman. And if you have time, look up who were the crazy producers of Superman that ended up ruining the franchise. I can't remember their names, but you know who I'm talking about, right, Chad?
Yeah, I'm blanking too.
They got the movie made and ended up ruining the franchise as it went on. So he was, he's famous for working on Superman for years and then finally getting fired for Superman 2. And then Richard Lester brought in to finish the picture. Salkind. Yeah. Then there's a movie called Inside Moves from 80, and I've never seen it. Have you guys seen it?
No, I have not. I can't say
John Savage, David Morris, I love David Morris, one of the great character actors of all time, but I've never even heard of it, much less seen it.
Yeah, sorry, I have not. I don't have anything to say about Inside Moves.
I don't.
Now, the next film he did,
The Toy, which we can all agree is the best Richard Donner picture.
I loved The Toy.
I loved The Toy as a kid. I haven't seen it in a long time.
And I haven't either, and I'm afraid to. Because, I just loved it. I watched it on repeatedly. And it was my introduction to Richard Pryor, honestly. The Toy was my introduction to Richard Pryor.
You ass. Sorry. If you've not seen it, you have no idea. I didn't know it was it's a remake.
It is?
Yeah, it says based on a picture by blah, 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 blah. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was, I just thought comedically Richard Pryor going crazy and Jackie Gleason.
Yeah, and the kid having everything.
It was, every toy the kid had in the toy.
Yeah.
I won it.
Right. He's a spoiled little rich white bastard who decides that he wants this African-American man to be his toy, and his dad is a millionaire or billionaire played by Jackie Gleason, and he hires him to do it. Boy, I don't know if this movie's going to get made today, Chad.
No.
But that's the plot.
Yeah.
That's the plot. I had loved it as a kid. I don't know how it's aged, though. It also has the late, great Ned Beatty. We could do a whole episode on Ned Beatty.
Yeah.
As we should.
Now, the next one is one that people love that I've never been attached to, that maybe I'd like it now if I rewatched it. Do you guys like Lady Hawk?
I didn't care for it as a kid. I kind of thought it was boring. I have not watched it since.
I haven't watched it in a long time. I've never been attached to it.
I had a hard time. I had a hard time Matthew Broderick in a medieval film. Something about it just doesn't mesh. Kind of like him fighting a giant lizard.
Well,
I realize what you're talking about.
No, I mean, I know some people love it, and I'll be honest,
it's got a cult following. I don't think it's as big as it used to be.
I probably need to sit down and watch it again because I watched it. I was probably a teenager, and it was edited for TV. It's on TBS or USA, one or the other. So, yeah, I mean, I probably need to revisit it, but
I haven't seen it in a long time, so I don't have anything to add about it when we're talking about it.
Now I just want to go on a bitch about why did they cast him as Inspector Gadget? It just didn't make sense.
Now, The Goonies is a movie that I showed my kid a few weeks ago. We've talked about it on here a little bit, that I loved as a kid, that doesn't quite do it for me now.
And see, I have the exact, now I watch it now and realize the sheer a lot of the plot doesn't make sense.
There's no plot for the most part. And there's holes. I mean, we talked about this before.
Yeah.
There is shit. They just show up.
Yeah. There's parts that irritate the hell out of me now as an adult, but it still has that kid. I still revert back. It's one of those few instances where I will revert back to my childhood.
Yeah.
And just enjoy it. Even though I know as an adult, I'm like, that makes no sense. Why are all those pipes there? How did they get to that point? Why is that at that area?
Or they'll just show up at that one point and they didn't.
Yeah.
I've often wondered, did they leave a lot of shit on the editing room floor, or did they never shoot it?
I don't know.
I'll never get to ask him now.
I have the ultimate, I still have not gone through it. I have the ultimate special edition of Goonies upstairs on Blu-ray.
Yeah.
I need to go back and look at all those special features. Huh?
Is there extra footage?
I don't know if there's extra footage or not. I know there's a shit ton of special features. So I need to go back and look and see. Maybe I will one day, but yeah, no. Since the kids came along, I don't have time to watch special features.
I agree. Now, the next one is one of my favorite movies of all time. In fact, the next three are
I Am Right. Well,
yeah. No, I agree. No, the sequel is that part 2 is just almost as good, if not better.
Immunity.
Lethal Weapon. Now, he was lucky, and I'm not taking anything from Dick Donner, but he was lucky that screenplay just fucking sizzles.
Yeah.
Black. He was the voice of a new generation of writing.
Yeah. That was the right time. Yeah. That was the right place, right time.
Yeah.
Now there is in prep for this episode, I kept trying to find it, but I can't find it. There's a great audio bite where Richard Donner breaks down in tears about casting Lethal Weapon, because he said he realized casting Lethal Weapon he was racist.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about,
because it's a great interview if you can find it. It's online somewhere.
Yeah,
but yeah, when somebody came to him for Murtaugh.
It was the great casting director. I can't think of her name, but am I right? She's a famous casting director, and I can't think of her name. Yeah, and she's like, Danny Glover, and but he's black.
But he's black.
Yeah,
yeah. He never could envision the character as an African American.
Yep,
and that's when he knew he was racist. And for us, Danny Glover is the only one who could be Murtaugh.
Well, Danny Glover. And no, they're both. It's the perfectly cast movie. Gary Busey is amazing in that movie.
Yes.
Right?
Everything, every piece of
crazy ass Gary Busey is amazing in that movie. Amazing. So that movie is almost perfectly written. It's a new voice for a new generation. Richard Donner, it opens up on action. Like what the sequel does. The sequel opens up in a car chase. You don't even see Lethal Weapon 2. It's Murtaugh Riggs screaming, hitting the roof. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm going to jump over one of them. There's a movie in the middle, but we might as well talk about Lethal Weapon and Lethal Weapon 2.
Yeah, we can't pass up my favorite Christmas movie of all time, but we'll get to it
in a second. And then we have some Bill Murray stories we can talk about. But I look at it now, and I guess you knew what you were getting, but it took balls of steel. There's not like an opening, and this is who it is. It's like, wow, remember they're in a car chase.
Yeah.
The Kruger and things in the middle of Lethal Weapon 2.
Oh, it is great.
It's a fantastic sequel, because I know they didn't intend to do a bunch of those, but that is a fantastic sequel. That I know that Shane Black originally wanted to kill Riggs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't. And they almost did, but they didn't. And he got replaced, and they had another writer. But I can't.
Which they did in the TV show.
Did they kill him in the TV show?
I don't know how they got rid of that character. James, did they kill him off?
It's not
shaking
so
your
long,
head.
is it?
Yeah. That was Marlon Wayans, right?
Marlon Wayans was Murtaugh.
Yeah. Anyway,
and Richard Donner actually was one of the producers of the show.
Yeah, I to be honest, I'm not exactly sure, but I just remember they did some recasting after.
I know Riggs dies in there, and they recast him with Sean William Scott, and then the show just never recovered. But
yeah, so that's what I was about to say. The show's not on, right?
It got canceled. It got canceled about a year after. Huh?
Did he get Me Too? I don't remember the actor, the guy with the mustache. What did he do?
Oh, he was just an asshole. He didn't. It wasn't Me Too. He was just an asshole.
Okay, I didn't know. So anyway, Lethal Weapon, one of my favorite action films of all time. Actually, man, Lethal Weapon and Lethal Weapon 2. I love them both for different reasons. Joe Pesci was perfect casting as well in the second one. The music in that movie, the fact that they went with Eric Clapton and a jazz kind of soundtrack, right?
Am I remembering it wrong? Lethal Weapon 2 has the scene where Riggs is in the mobile home on the road, right? Yeah, that's one of my favorite action scenes of all time.
Yeah, where he's crawling through the trailer. And they killed the girl. They killed the girl in Lethal Weapon 2.
Mm-hmm. But that's what but I do say, I have a hard time picking between the two. I mean, I slightly inch Lethal Weapon above it.
Well,
just because I like the character development in that.
That and Gary Busey's fucking awesome as the villain in that.
Yep.
The only other perfectly cast. Great music. Nothing that I had to bring up the music because Eric Clapton did some of the music for it, and why hadn't that happened before? But it changes it, that whole with the guitar.
Mm-hmm.
Just totally different.
Yeah, Richard Donner mixed everything.
You want to talk about your favorite Christmas movie?
Yeah, Scrooged.
Santa Claus versus the Martians.
Yeah. I was trying to think. The night that the reindeer cried.
The night the reindeer died.
Yeah.
I cried. He killed those fuckers. The $6 million man was trying to stop him. Leave me.
Yeah, if you ever go back and listen to the Christmas episode of Good Movie Monday, I didn't purposely list this because I thought we were going to talk about it in depth later on. So I mentioned Ernest Saves Christmas, but Scrooged is my favorite Christmas movie of all time, period. It's still my favorite version of A Christmas Carol. And what a lot of people don't realize about Scrooged is Richard Donner got Bill Murray to come back to acting. He hadn't been in a movie in how many years?
He did a cameo in Little Shop of Horrors. It'd been since Ghostbusters, because people forget. He did A Razor's Edge, which is a movie that he demanded to get to do. He did Ghostbusters to get to do it. I'm pretty sure Razor's Edge was shot before Ghostbusters. It came out after Ghostbusters, but it was shot before Ghostbusters because he was still off somewhere in Europe when they were just about ready to roll on Ghostbusters. You guys heard the story, right?
Yeah.
And so he hadn't acted except for the cameo in Little Shop of Horrors since. So it was 88, it's 4 years. And Bill Murray, Ghostbusters, we're going to do a whole thing about Ghostbusters, I'm sure, towards November as the new one comes out. We're going to dedicate a whole episode to one of our favorite movies. But Ghostbusters was the biggest comedy of all time till Home Alone. Those people could not have been hotter after the summer of 84.
Yeah.
Bill Murray had his choice of roles. Dan Aykroyd, whom I love, who should not be a leading man, became a leading man.
Yeah.
Dan Aykroyd, though, Dan Aykroyd is one of those people that would be a bucket list conversation for me.
But I think we all three, do we all agree? I'm not besmirching him. I love Dan Aykroyd, but he's not a leading man. He
is a phenomenal creative talent.
And he's great in it, but I said Dragnet. I love Dragnet. I don't know, why does anybody talk about Dragnet anymore?
It's just too awesome. That's the problem. It's too because honestly, could you imagine now what it would take to get Tom Hanks and Dan Aykroyd in a movie together that was a comedy, a straight up comedy?
You wouldn't.
You wouldn't. Tom Hanks, I think Tom Hanks is done with straight up comedies, unfortunately.
You wouldn't. Or you just get offered them. Go ahead, Jeff.
The other thing about
I laughed my way through News of the World. I'm a sick person.
I didn't see it yet.
I haven't seen it yet. I want to. I wanted to see it.
Philadelphia was a laugh a minute riot.
I haven't been in theaters because of plague.
Yeah,
but no. And Richard Donner, he can handle actors, but Scrooge was one of those cases where they just didn't get along.
No, but a lot of people didn't get along with Bill Murray over the years.
Yeah, no, and Bill Murray is hard to get around. Here is Murray's quote about when he talked to Roger Ebert, and they talked about disagreements with Donner. He says, only a few, every single minute of the day. That could have been a really, really great movie. The script was so good. There's maybe one take in the final cut of the movie that is mine. We made it so fast. It was like doing a movie live. He kept telling me to go through things louder, louder, louder. I think he was deaf. That's Bill Murray's quote about working with Richard Donner.
Well, Bill Murray said that he didn't think either one of them got what they wanted out of that movie. He didn't think Richard Donner was happy either.
But I still think it works so well. And it still has one of the best lines in cinema history. The bitch hit me with a toaster.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't think.
There's not a ton of interviews with Richard Donner talking about it. I wonder if it was a sore subject.
I think he it's not one of his highlights of his career, but man, it's one of the highlights of my life.
We love it. Movies. I get it. I wonder if it's interesting. It is an uneven film. I mean, there's parts of it where it doesn't make sense. Like when they cut to the dinner table, there's, it's a little jumpy, but I'm with Chad. I loved it. I saw it.
I mean, there's some scenes like where the whole thing where she's giving him a raspberry and he looks like he's going insane, but then he snaps back to normal. And then the whole scene about him going into the sewer and finding the frozen body.
Yeah.
There are parts that just are uneven, but man, I just love the movie. I watch it every year.
Absolutely. And Bill Murray has said it's because it's on AMC 24/7. I disagree. AMC only plays shit 24/7 that people want to watch 24/7.
And I don't watch it on AMC. I have a DVD copy that I pop in.
If people didn't like it, they
wouldn't watch it.
They wouldn't.
Hence the whole Christmas. I still get pissed about the Christmas Story thing, but I'm okay with Scrooged.
Oh, Christmas Story's good.
I know, but they don't need to marathon it that much.
No, it should only be It's a Wonderful Life.
Get some
No, I get to watch it like I can catch it 30 minutes here and then turn to TNT and get 30 minutes there. I love that movie. Anyway.
Should only be It's a Wonderful Life. That's how it was when I was a kid.
They didn't
every 20 minutes a new you could just watch the same scene.
And we've never got a real special edition features loaded of Scrooge, and I have no idea why other than they both didn't get along.
And I don't think we're ever going to get it.
But the movie was the movie has been a hit for years and years. It was a hit when it came out.
Yeah.
Don't you think that's hilarious? Neither one were happy with it. Oh, here it is. It's a hit. So he did. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so are y'all?
We're y'all blowing him.
Okay. I wanted to mention in passing, because I'll be honest, I remember seeing this movie and I did not know it had a $35 million budget because it did not make that back.
No, I know what you're talking about.
Radio Flyer.
Yeah.
I remember seeing commercials for it, and I literally, because that came out when? 92, I would have been 12 years old.
Yeah.
Movie came out, and I remember seeing, I was like, there's no way that's a happy movie.
There's no way. I didn't know it was going to be what it was. I guess I didn't see the commercials. So I rented the movie and I was like, oh, it's about a kid in a wagon. I'll love this movie, 12-year-old me. And man, is it dark.
Yeah. So it's written by David Mickey Evans, who wrote The Sandlot and
directed The Sandlot.
Yeah. Yeah. And is still active and doing a lot of other stuff and all that.
Ed.
That being said, also has a great cast. John Hurd, Adam Baldwin, Elijah Wood, Lorraine Bracco. I mean, a great cast. That being said, it's about basically these kids that soup up, or in their mind that they think that the radio flyer, their wagon, will stop them from being abused and all of that stuff. And that's However,
and all that stuff. James just kind of goes, the abuse and the stuff, the kids and their wives.
I don't want to dwell on that. What I want to bring up.
Well, that's the whole movie, James. It's about.
I know, but I'm trying
abuse.
to tell a story that involves Donner. Donner directed it. There's not a lot that's often said about that. But when he passed away, John Scalzi, I'm sure I mispronounced that. Sorry.
He beat poor Joseph Mazzello, James.
John Scalzi.
What did Joseph Mazzello say, though?
Yeah.
Oh no, Joe.
John Scalzi is an author who wrote one of my favorite novels, Red Shirts, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's and then Old Man's War, which is a series he did, amongst other things. Scalzi's a fun author.
Yeah.
That being said, he back in the day did movie reviews, and he did a positive one for Radio Flyer. Yeah. And the reason I'm sharing this story is when Donner died, Scalzi tweeted and said, Richard Donner actually, because he did a positive review, sent him a very nice thank you note.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so he sent him a thank you note, and this is what he said. Richard Donner once sent me a thank you note for my review of his film Radio Flyer. I think in part because I was one of the few critics who was kind to the film. I suspect it was a film of the heart for him. A fine director with a distinct style. That's all he said.
That being said, I don't hate Radio Flyer. I think it's a good film, but it's one of those films that was done so well about such a topic that is so dark and disturbing. I have never been able to go back and view it just because it's one of those films that touched me on an emotional level that I can't
go watch it because it didn't touch me on that kind of
level.
It
did when I was a kid and what that poor kid was going through in that film.
It's a dark film. Yeah.
It's dark. It's done really well. It's beautifully shot. Everything about Radio Flyer is beautifully done.
And Tom Hanks is uncredited as the narrator, correct?
Correct. Yeah. He plays Elijah. He's the Elijah Wood grown up.
If you want a movie about how not to be a stepfather, Radio Flyer is your film.
Oh man, it literally breaks your heart watching that film. I remember I was crying at 12 years old watching that film. I remember, and it's just it haunts me so bad that I couldn't go back and watch it again. And that says something about Richard Donner.
So the unfortunate thing, it's not unfortunate. He made a lot of money from them, but we got 2 more Lethal Weapons and we really didn't need them. Lethal Weapon 3 is fun. And then many years later, there was Lethal Weapon 4 that's no fun.
I'm going to disagree with you on that one about Lethal Weapon 4. I find elements of it entertaining, but I agree with you. It is a pale comparison of the first two.
It's a bad script. I mean, what's the positive thing or Jet Li?
Yeah.
It's basically a full-blown comedy by Lethal Weapon 4.
And Chris Rock didn't need to be in it. Yeah.
Yeah, right. But it's the action's kind of gone. It's kind of a full-blown comedy. The dark.
Well, yeah, and that's because the whole thing is they're older now. They can't get that action. That's the way I interpreted it. Was, well, they're older now. They can't do that now. That's the whole part of the movie,
I guess. But I really want to talk about real quick. Tell something that had a huge influence on me.
No, I'm glad we're going to talk about this because again, he directed one of my favorite episodes of Tales from the Crypt.
And he produced Tales from the Crypt.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
2 seconds real quick. Lethal Weapon 4, as y'all were talking about it, I'm like, yeah, I don't remember anything about it. So I clicked on it and I said, why would I, what else has a person, because obviously Shane Black did not write part 4, spoiler.
No.
It's not a spoiler, but it was written by Channing Gibson. Yep. Channing Gibson's credits are 8 is Enough, St. Elsewhere, LA Law, The Birds of Paradise, NYPD Blue, Murder One, all TV shows. Then he did Lethal Weapon 4 in 1998, Cradle to the Grave in 2003, and I have to mention it because this came up on this show before, the 70 minutes long, entertaining, but don't think about it too much, rock version of Walking Tall. That was his most recent credit.
Listen, that movie is... I guess I haven't seen it in a long time. I remember just being so disheartened by it.
I really enjoy it. And
I've seen it and don't remember it. I saw X versus Ballistics, X versus Sever, hated it, but I remember it.
The fight scene between where they both take on Jet Li. I love that scene.
Yeah, because it's Jet Li.
Well, no, it's them too. These old guys who used to be able to do this, and they can't do it even together. They're getting their asses kicked, and yet they find a way to beat him.
And they find a way.
They do. I mean, it's an action fight scene that is dirty. There's no clear. They are getting their asses handed to them, and they have to find a way to beat him, and they do it in the most dirty way possible. And I love that about that
bridge, right? Like a boardwalk bridge. Is that where it takes place under or something?
Yeah, underneath. Yeah, because it's the water's coming down on them. Yeah.
Oh,
and Jet Li is just beating the shit out of them, and they can't win, so they have to figure out how to. I just love that whole scene. Yeah. But no, I agree with you. It's a flawed film, and it's mostly more on the humor. So anyway, but yeah, let's talk about Tales from the Crypt.
Well, so Tales from the Crypt is hugely influential on me.
Same here.
I was 10, 11 years old when it premiered in 89. Loved it. I was lucky enough to have HBO. I never missed an episode.
I was not. I had to find ways to watch it. And when I did, man, I was in heaven.
Yeah, I love it. I haven't done it in a while. I haven't done it in the last 2 years.
Do you have every season?
I have every season, yeah.
I'm going to start borrowing those from you since I can't find you.
Why are they not on HBO Go or Plus?
It's like, I think we talked about this at one point. James said it's something about the copyright issues. They just can't, there's so much built into those episodes because they were some.
There's some episodes part of the issue people, and you're like, how the hell did Tales from the Crypt get them? But they did.
Well, I'd say, and part of the issue is that so EC, the publishing company, owns Tales from the Crypt, but the Crypt Keeper is not. The original Crypt Keeper is a guy that watches the tombs.
Yeah.
It's just he's an old, haggard-looking guy.
Yeah, it's not the same thing.
They created that character for the show, and that's why the reboots and all that have run into the same snags. Is that you effectively have two copyrighted materials. One is owned by, the Crypt Keeper as the puppet.
Yeah,
it's owned over here. Tales from the Crypt is tied to that comic, and so there's literally two competing.
The Williams.
That's how it was explained to me.
It may be one of the top two. It's in the top 3 of best anthology series ever made.
Yeah, it was very influential. And at the time, we'd had Monsters and Tales from the Dark Side. We'd had Alfred Hitchcock.
The Hitchhiker.
We had the Hitcher, but a lot of these were not a budget. Other than Twilight Zone and Amazing Stories, most of these were not a budget.
No, they were very low.
Real
quick, and let's talk about the prime example of low budget, the anthology series Monsters.
Yeah,
where everything had to take place in one room.
Yes,
the whole show was based around they put a monster in it, and all the action had to take place in one room. You go back and watch those. I loved them as a kid. They are not good, and they are the defining of low budget.
Yes, television. As low as it gets.
Yeah.
So, there's a big budget here. They had A-list stars, A-list talent, directors, and it was produced by Robert Zemeckis, Walter Hill, Richard Donner, and who am I missing? Joel Silver, and they all took turns. They all had to direct some episodes, correct?
Mm-hmm.
They all made a deal that they direct 3. And Richard Donner's
isn't Tales from the Crypt the only directing credit of Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Yeah, no, he directed a TV movie for TNT, a Christmas movie.
Sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Connecticut. Look it up if I'm wrong. But the ventriloquist dummy, is that the one you like, Chad?
Absolutely.
It also makes no sense. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It jumps to one, but it's got Don Rickles and Bobcat Goldthwait. How can you go wrong?
Yeah.
About a killer ventriloquist dummy. You can't go wrong. And it's directed by Richard Donner. So anyway, now, one of my favorite Westerns from the 90s, because there were a ton. There wasn't a ton. Maverick is a lot of fun to watch.
It is. And it still is.
I haven't watched it in a long time. I don't have a copy of it. Maverick is based on an old series that starred James Gardner. James Gardner was in the movie Maverick, and it stars Mel Gibson and Jane. Oh my God, Jodie Foster. Jodie Foster. I couldn't remember Jodie Foster's name. The director. It has a ton of
The
cameos.
lady who got Kennedy, the guy who got Reagan shot.
Oh, you say that? What did I say earlier? Mine was at least a joke about a fictional character. Anyway, so Reagan's going to get pissed at you if he can remember.
Oh, that is.
Not worry about it. He's dead. He can't sue me. So, James,
Yes.
have you seen Maverick?
I have seen Maverick. Yeah.
Maverick has more cameos per minute of old TV Western stars
and country singers
than any movie ever made. Agreed?
Oh yeah.
Well, why would it not?
It is exhausting.
I agree. But per minute, all the way.
Yeah.
Hell, even Danny Glover has a cameo in it, and they play.
Yeah. He says, I'm getting too old for this shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you want to hear really William, the great screenwriter, whom I completely forgot his name. I even read his damn book. This is so sad. Give me a second.
Well, while you look it up, I will say this:
William
I love Maverick, but if I don't turn it off as soon as that movie ends, I immediately get sucked out of it. I hate that rolling credit scene of them all singing in that barn. I hate it.
Oh, to Amazing Grace.
Yeah, I hate it.
I don't remember.
I just despise it. Oh my God, even to this day, I'm watching them singing. Mel Gibson's in there going along with them. I'm like, no, turn it off. It's painful to watch.
William Goldman for years was pissed at Richard Donner because it's a pretty good script. It even has a lot of great William Goldman lines, like the opening of it is I was having another shitty day.
Yeah.
Right, or something like that. Anyway, William Goldman was pissed because they put a love scene between him and Jodie Foster.
Why would that piss him off?
Because it wasn't in the script.
You know what? I'll be honest. So
honestly, it doesn't need it in the movie. It doesn't add anything to it.
No, I was about to say, I think that's one of the things that, to be honest, that is one of my, and there's a lot not to like, but and this is not anything to do with Donner, obviously, but Jonah Hex as a movie is not great. Brolin and Jonah Hex.
How are you rolling Jonah Hex into Maverick?
Same reason.
The sex scene?
What does Megan Fox add to? And I'm not knocking Megan Fox. I'm not knocking, but there is nothing added other than, we got Megan Fox in the picture.
Well, Jodie Foster's character is cool. I just don't. I probably
that's what I'm saying.
William Goldman
that
them having sex and actually hooking up takes something out of it.
Yeah, I don't. There's just if it doesn't drive the plot further, if it doesn't add anything, why do it? Unless it's just to say you did it.
Yeah.
Which is why in every James Thomas picture
we have sex.
You've often wondered, how many times can that man eat a Twinkie on film? Why did you go sex? I'm more interested in Twinkies.
Because that's a euphemism for eating Twinkies. Or Twinkies is a euphemism.
I worry about how your house is run, sir.
Well, I'm going to go get a bunch of fucking Twinkies right now and show you. I'm going to put them all in my mouth. Slowly.
I'm gonna disagree about the sex scene because I feel like the sex scene was crucial to the whole plot of the whole side plot of the fact that how she got the one up on both of them.
I guess. I don't know. Let's move on to.
Can we talk about Dub Taylor for just a minute? Who? I love Dub Taylor.
Oh, the actor, the character.
Yeah, Dub Taylor. He's in Maverick.
Yeah,
and of course he was in the best television show ever created, Johnny Bago.
Okay.
Just saying. Go on. Let's talk more about Richard Donner because nobody wants to talk about Dub Taylor.
Well, maybe later when we do a whole episode. I can't remember Assassins. I wasn't crazy about Assassins, and apparently I'm not.
So I like Assassins, not for Sylvester Stallone. I like Antonio Banderas going full tilt boogie psychopath in Assassins. That's the only thing that I remember about that film is just Antonio Banderas cheesing it up to 100th level to play this psychotic hitman. And I didn't realize it was written by the Wachowskis.
That's what I was just looking up. I was shocked that they
and Brian Helgeland, for God's sakes.
That makes sense, but the Wachowski, I didn't realize they did that. And by the way, conspiracy theory, I don't know that I've actually ever seen the full movie.
Seriously?
No, I was never interested in it. And it came out. All right. So I can't get this part out of my mind. And this has nothing to do with Richard Donner, but Hillside Cinema, which is still in Hazard, Kentucky, and is still the only operating movie theater there. I was driving by one day, I guess this was in 96, 98, whenever it was, and Leave It to Beaver, if anybody remembers, they did it came and went, but they did a movie for Leave It to Beaver.
I forgot about that.
And it was playing at the same time as Conspiracy Theory, and they had them in the same cinema, and instead of writing both names, it was Conspiracy Beaver. I drove by it a half a dozen times laughing at the Conspiracy Beaver. Now, there's one way to take it. I actually took it the clean way of this beaver, right? It's got the trench coat on, it's got the whole thing and some glasses. Conspiracy Beaver, guys.
I love
theater, the 90s, Kentucky.
But I loved Conspiracy Theory. It's one of the few Julia Roberts film I actually enjoy.
I need to go back and watch it.
And it's simply
the villain, right?
Yeah, and it's for the scene where they're in. It's the scene where they're Patrick Stewart is interrogating Mel Gibson. I love that scene.
It's also written by Brian Helgeland
of L.A. Confidential, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, don't give him and Nightmare on Elm Street 4 credit where credit's due.
I'll go with L.A. Confidential.
I was gonna say. So speaking of,
sorry, Brian, Mick, love you.
Speaking of Brian Helgeland and things like that, there is if on Payback straight up director's cut, there's actually an interview with Richard Donner on there. And the reason there's an interview with Richard Donner is because Brian Helgeland, I always screw up his name, Helgeland, has him on there to tell the story about how Payback got made. Here's the quote. Donner claims that he met screenwriter Brian Helgeland when he was driving by the Warner Brothers gate. Brian was holding a sign that said, "We'll write for work for money." Richard got out of the car and asked him about the sign. Brian replied that he was a screenwriter, but was looking for work. Donner decided to give him a chance, which led to the two of them working on Conspiracy Theory.
That's awesome.
And also working on Assassins. So there you go, which means, boys, we got to go get us a sign and stand out in front of Warner Bros. What are we doing trying this other way? I don't know.
Have you ever heard some of these stories, though? Some of the things that people do? I mean,
so there's this
talent only gets you so far.
There's a theme going around, and I've actually started to follow some people, and I need to see if I can reach out to them and get them to do the show. But about all these people, because I guess there's been some charges against Columbia University, their MFA in film, making all these promises, and not a lot of people are getting work after they graduate and things like that. And one of them, there's I'm blanking on the name, forgive me, but he's a screenwriter, and he actually went for directing. And he said the problem was we had to do our own film. Well, it wasn't covered by our student fees.
Yeah,
we had to come up with a budget for a student film.
You had to, and then you actually had to buy actual footage. You actually had to buy film stock,
and that's what he was talking about. And he goes, "I couldn't afford to, so I had to change my major to screenwriting to be able to finish." And he goes, "And I still haven't finished. I was 2 hours short." And he goes on to tell this story. He goes, "It's a true story. I left. And he's done some stuff that I knew about and stuff like that. But he said, so I never technically finished. I'm 2 hours short of my MFA." But as I was leaving, I looked at one of the professors and I said, I'm hoping I can go ahead and sell the screenplay. And he goes, and I ended up being able to sell it. And the professor looked at me, my screenwriting professor goes, "If you figure out how to sell yours, can you help me figure out how to get mine into the right person's hand?"
Yep.
And was teaching it. And then the other side of that, which led to this entire, if you find this thread, it's fascinating because all these industry insiders, some of them big names, start to chime in. And cases where they were called back to their alma mater and their professors would try to get them, now that you've made it, can you take? It's fascinating. Some of the, anyway, the one other story that gets told was there were 4 people that dropped out after their first semester. And the poster said, "If you're worried about what happened to them, I'll tell you one of them directed a certain superhero film that made over $1 billion a couple years ago. He and his brother did it. Hi, Anthony.
Yep.
And it was, he goes, so obviously him dropping out after one semester did not end his career. And so, yeah, it's fascinating how these stories happen. And it, like you said, Donner brought a lot of people up. I mean, obviously Helgeland had worked before, but Donner didn't hurt him any.
Yep. All right. So the next one's Lethal Weapon 4. We kind of already talked about that.
And then we have 16 blocks, if I'm not mistaken.
Timeline and then 16 blocks. I actually don't think I've ever seen Timeline. I
haven't either. It's one of the few.
It was a bomb.
Yeah. And to give you all I don't know if I've ever talked about this. I may have talked about it briefly. I still am a huge Michael Crichton fan. I read all of his books, and this was not related to Jurassic Park. Timeline is one of the movie and books that I actually never got around to reading. And the movie just didn't interest me. Plus, I don't like Paul Walker.
Well, so a little bit about that as well. The screenplay.
I'm sad he's dead. Just don't care for the son of a bitch in movies.
I don't care for Paul Walker either.
Never understood it.
Wow.
Well, and then
Armie Hammer had to be a cannibal.
I mean,
this is Chad Jennings. Unconnected thoughts.
He's really good in Call Me by Your Name. I mean, I just really like that movie. Sorry,
he was good. I haven't seen that one, but he was good. And Sorry to Bother You too.
Yeah,
anyway.
That's a good movie. He's good at everything. Boy, he's talented.
And what I will say is, if you look at Timeline, and I'm not one to blame the actors.
Have you seen Timeline, James?
True story. Yes.
No.
Okay.
Again,
tell me a false one.
Can't tell you much about it other than I was like, I've heard this story before, and this is not the story I expected, right?
Yeah.
That being said, so a little bit about the people who wrote that. The two top credited screenplay writers, which we know there's dozens, but Jeff Mcguire. Now, if you're like, Jeff Mcguire, I know Jeff Mcguire. That's right. You know him for writing the screenplay to Victory, which was Pele's big film with Michael Caine and Sylvester Stallone. And then that was 1981. 5 years later, he wrote Joe's favorite film, Toby McTeague. Joe, you want to tell us about why you love Toby McTeague?
Well, I mean, I turned into Christopher Walken for a split second.
It was a film that I watched.
Film that I've never seen nor heard of.
Anyway, that was 1986, so 5 years there, and then
was
7 years later.
Did it star James? Forget it. Gardner in Tank. I saw James Gardner in Tank.
Then 7 years later, he made In the Line of Fire. Clint Eastwood.
Yeah.
Pretty big film. Then he made Timeline, and his most recent credit in 2006 was the rock film Gridiron Gang. Now, his co-author on
which I like.
I've never seen it.
His co-author on Timeline, the second person credited for the screenplay.
Yes, James.
We're talking about Richard Donner.
Is George Nolfi. George Nolfi, his first screenplay was Timeline. He went on to write Joe's favorite Ocean's film, Ocean's 12. And then he wrote The Sentinel, Bourne Ultimatum, Adjustment Bureau, and he's got a film coming out called The Banker. There you go.
Well, thank you for that little bit of hell.
I was sharing that to say that Timeline, despite being based on Michael Crichton, who is his films adapt pretty well to movie. I mean, his books adapt pretty well.
His film adapt good to movie.
Yep, that what I doesn't say. Anyway,
don't say he did.
It was a complicated film. That's all. That's what I was getting at, and it went through a lot of hands.
16 Blocks is a very solid thriller.
I love it, and honestly, so I do love 16
I haven't seen
Blocks.
it in a long time.
I love it. It has three of my favorite. It has three great actors, and unfortunately, I will admit I love Bruce Willis again. One of those complicated assholes of a person, but David Morse and Mos Def, who I believe he goes by his real name now. I'm sorry, Mos, if I don't remember how you go by now. But honestly, I'm okay. So I'm going to give.
Yassine Bey, by the way, it's his name.
Yeah.
I may be mispronouncing it.
Bruce Willis, I'm going to admit, after this movie, he did have Moonrise Kingdom. He had Reds. He had Looper. But guys, I honestly think 16 Blocks is his last great performance.
Really? What about Looper?
I like him in Looper, but
that's his last good one. But
it's his last good film, but him as an actor in 16 Blocks. So if you haven't seen 16 Blocks, he is a drunk police detective who, he's just doesn't care anymore. He's just on the job. And he gets assigned to take this witness to a courthouse 16 blocks away from the police station. And it's all about the insanity that happens of people trying to get him and this convict who he has no relation to. He may not even like him, but he knows it is the right thing to do to get him to that courthouse. And he has had a life full of regret.
Yep.
But he is taking this stand to get that man to the courthouse. It is his last great performance. And I know Looper is a good film, but Looper it's mostly Joseph Gordon-Levitt but he is great in that film. But yeah, I think 16 Blocks is amazing. The only thing I hate about that is the movie poster says 118 minutes. The movie's an hour and 42 minutes long.
By the way, did you know have you ever seen the alternate ending?
No,
I have, James, but I don't remember it because I have the special feature. I have the special edition of 16 Blocks, and I can't remember.
So the other ending is that Nugent calls off the hit on Jack, and they're in the basement of the courthouse, et cetera, but they can't get through to Torres before he kills him. And so Nugent tries to run upstairs to stop Torres from killing him. Jack tells the ADA that it'll testify, but Torres shoots him. And the movie actually ends with the tape falling out, and they play the tape. And the last scene is them actually covering up Jack.
That's right, Bruce. Yeah, okay.
Bruce Willis' character with the sheet. He's dead.
Yeah,
his last heroic event cost him his life.
Yeah,
a little bit of a different ending.
It is a great film, and I wonder why it was Richard Donner's last directorial movie.
Well, at this time, so he's 91 when he died. This would have been, so this is 15 years ago.
2006.
81. He'd been 76. He's 76 years old when it came out.
Yeah.
So I don't know why it was. And I'm just talking out loud, stream of consciousness. I mean, was it because he's 76 and he's getting tired? He wanted to produce more? I don't know. Because for years there was discussion that there'd be a Lethal Weapon 5. He'd even talked about doing a Lethal Weapon 5, and even a couple of years ago it was brought up.
Yeah, it was. But then Mel Gibson had all those problems.
Well, no, just a year or two ago it was brought up, a couple of years before COVID.
Was it?
Yeah, it was. Go look, every few years it come back up, and then Richard Donner was going to direct it. It never happened. I don't know. Tarantino talks about retiring at the top, and he's only going to make one more movie, and that directing is a young man's game. He's already in his 50s. I don't know. I'd like to have asked Richard. I don't know, but 16 Blocks wasn't a huge hit. I was just looking up the budget.
It wasn't.
It made its money back worldwide, but wasn't a huge hit.
It kind of came and went.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a movie that nobody remembers. It's a solid thriller.
It's a great character piece, in my opinion.
Yeah. I for some odd reason, I actually the only thing I didn't like about it was I don't like Mos Def's performance in the way he talks.
Oh, really?
Talks. Yeah, it aggravates the piss out of me. I don't know, because I also know he doesn't talk like that. It just bothers me.
Yeah.
But David Morse can do no wrong, in my opinion.
David Morse can't, and honestly,
he's never given a bad performance.
I'm going to give Mos Def, who, again, I'm sorry, James, you said, what's his?
Yasmin
Bey.
Yeah,
I honestly feel like he doesn't give a bad performance in anything that he does. I mean, he was the best part of Hitchhiker's Guide.
Well, he was the only one. As much as I love Martin Freeman, and I thought he was perfect, I don't think he actually was perfect. But Mos Def was pretty good in that. He's the closest. Yeah. Well, no, Alan Rickman is the voice. He's just the best.
Yeah, that's pretty spot on.
That's pretty.
Yeah. I know we're talking about somebody. I like even Lasman Blay in The Woodsman. I thought his performance in The Woodsman was great. So anyway,
so I don't know why he didn't do another one. He still produced.
Yeah,
So,
but he did honestly. If you look at his productions, he did not produce that much after 2006. He directed mostly the X-Men films.
I wonder if apparently he had a place in Hawaii and loved to watch the sunrise, sunset.
He may have just been old and said, "You know what? I'm going to take my life."
That's what I was about to say.
He did
also,
a John Carpenter.
He also liked to smoke weed.
Richard Donner did?
Yeah. So reading Martin Short's book, and him and his wife, before she'd passed on, sitting in a screening with Richard Donner in the front, and next to Laura, his wife, Laura Schuler Donner, turning around before the movie goes, "Did anybody mind if I light a spliff?"
So it may
he could be hanging out. I love the idea that he, Willie Nelson, and Woody Harrelson are in Hawaii smoking weed with Bill Maher.
Here's a little quote.
Because I know Woody Harrelson and Bill Maher and Willie smoke weed in Hawaii when they're there. I also like the idea that I would be there with them, but I clearly would be the uncool one out of that crowd.
Here's a quote that may shed some light on why he stopped directing. And I think it's a great story. It also shows a sense of humor. Quote, "I have a bust of Abraham Lincoln in my office, and it's not because of the greatness of what he did for our country, but it's because that whenever I look at it, I have to remember that an actor killed him." And he has several quotes, by the way. If you read some quotes about Mel Gibson, he says Mel Gibson is the most exciting thing to come into my life as an actor and a friend. He's a very special human being. And then they ask him another question. He goes, "Well, he's God's gift to a director, but he tells the worst jokes on set."
So, one last thing. This came out a couple years ago. I didn't know it. Is apparently him. It's also Mel Brooks and who else? There's a famous producer. They had lunch every Friday, and had for years.
Yeah.
And Mel Brooks,
that would be a great lunch.
and Mel Brooks talked about how it went from, it's the guy that produced Young Frankenstein too. It's Michael something, because he owed him, and then he ended up paying for lunch for the next 20 or 30 years because they'd all meet for lunch. And he said basically all it changed over their long friendship with these 4 or 5 men having lunch on Fridays was that it went from talk about girls in the 70s to in the 2000s about their doctors.
Michael Gruskoff?
Yes, I think that's it. Google it about the lunches.
Okay.
By the way, I found one of Harlan Ellson's quotes about regarding The Omen.
Hold on. Is it Harlan Ellison listing off the writing credits of the writer from The Omen? Because I don't want to.
No.
I love you, James. I really do.
He doesn't love you. He doesn't.
So
birthday's tomorrow, and he's feeling fat and sassy.
Oh,
so that the person introduces the quote by saying that Ellison's writing on Richard Donner's his critique of The Omen was, quote, overwrought even for him. But when he goes on, he describes that scene that we were talking about, Warner's decapitation. And as he says, when I saw it, the audience was laughing and had a non-orgasmic reaction, concluding that this is the absolutely lowest point I've ever reached in my loathing of my species. He went on to refer to Donner as, quote, that little Dickie Donner, famed far and wide as the director of the television kiddie show The Banana Splits and a movie about a superhero. That was Ellison's summary of Richard Donner. Take it as you will.
Thank you. He left, and I like Ellison, but that adds nothing.
Dude, no, and that's my entire. But again, it's one of those things that if Ellison referred to us as those idiots that talk about films, we would put that on a banner. And so
like this.
yeah, it would have been that. Literally, if Stephen King literally goes, I don't know why you listen to those idiots, that would be on our banner from now on.
Dude, we were excited. Well, shit, I was when Uva Bowles, like, who are these boneheads? Remember?
Yeah. Why would you talk to them when you can come on my show?
My show. I don't know these boneheads.
Boneheads? Why are they talking about me?
And he's considered the worst filmmaker of all time. He's like Ed Wood Part 2.
I don't know. He may be Ed Wood Part 2. He's still no Coleman Francis.
Yeah.
Ugh.
So anyway, that's been our episode about Richard Donner. If you've not watched some of these movies, we really, really check out. Oh, you've had to have seen Lethal Weapon. You've had to have seen Scrooge. You've had to have seen the Goonies.
It's Superman. At least
Superman. And if you've actually never watched the original Omen, go back. It's a solid horror flick.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else, gentlemen?
Just discussions after it.
Yeah.
It ain't going to convert nobody.
All right. So thank you all so much for tuning in. We should have a couple of interviews coming up, which is exciting. I don't have anything else to say. I would pitch a show, but by the time this comes up, the show would have been over.
We'll miss you, Chick Vanira. I've already butchered his name.
And William Smith. And
Barzini.
Nelson. Richard Donner.
All the other heads of the Five family.
God, we've lost so many people that never did our show.
Never. They ain't going to do it now.
Not unless we get that Ouija board up.
Nope.
I've seen which board. I ain't getting some damn demon.